The truth's around here somewhere. Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about the X-Files Season 1, Episode 11. It is called Eve. So spoilers for the episode. This one's about creepy little girls. Basically, two identical girls who live in different sides of the US. Both have their fathers killed in the exact same way, and Mulder and Scully investigate. To skip ahead a little bit, it was them. It was them all along. It was the little brats themselves who killed their dads. Which, I think at one point Mulder even speculates that maybe it's the girls, but then it kind of veers in different directions and it kind of comes back round to that later on. But there's a whole plot about eugenics and cloning and all things going on. Mostly pretty fun. There's some creepy moments. I think the back half of the episode is much stronger than the first half. Not that there's anything wrong with the first half, but it does kind of feel like it's going through a few different ideas before it really finally settles on what the episode's actually going to be. And what I mean by that is, okay, you've got the creepy moment of like some strangers finding one of the girls out in the street and then checking on the dad, and he's dead. And he has what looks like a vampire bite, honestly. He's got like two little holes in his neck, and he's died of blood loss. Like, we find that out quite quickly after the fact. But from there, like, Mulder starts going on about this phenomena with cows, how there's this theory that cows are, or that cattle have shown up dead in a similar way, where their blood's been drained, but there's no blood spill at the crime scene, and this has been happening for decades and decades, but this is the first time he's ever seen it on a human. And he thinks this is, you know, it's listed in the X-Files as a UFO-related phenomena, and Scully questions that. And the idea being that aliens are coming down and experimenting on cattle, but now maybe that they've went up to humans. And I don't really have a problem that this is all wrong, necessarily. Like, obviously, as we go through the episode, it pivots in a very different direction. But it kind of feels like it's never... It never feels like Mulder ever has a moment in this episode where he's like, oh, it's not really that, it's actually this. And even when he goes to question the little girl from the first murder, he's asking questions about anything weird, and the girl starts talking about red lightning. Like, the cattle thing's just kind of an unrelated thing that happens to look similar, I guess? Because it never really comes up again. Or in any way, like, do they kind of try and tie it in some other way, or suggest that maybe this method's similar to what someone else is doing, or that the cattle thing's actually related to eugenics experiments and that's why it's similar and it's never had anything to do with UFOs? Like, I'd be okay with that, but it felt a bit weird that once we actually pivoted to what the episode was going to be, I just kind of looked back at the first half of the episode and thought all that talk of red lightning and UFO shit just all of a sudden feels kind of like we were just kind of stalling time until it was time to reveal what was really going on. And what's actually going on is, once Mulder and Scully discover there's a second victim that happened at the exact same time on the opposite side of the country, the little girl, when they get to this second crime scene, is identical to the first little girl. They naturally have some questions like, were these two daughters adopted and separated soon after birth? And the mum's like, no, I gave birth to her. But the one thing that does connect them is they both the parents of these two kids went to fertility clinics in the mid-80s. And Mulder and Scully go and investigate this fertility clinic, and we find out quite quickly that there was a woman here, played by Frasier's agent from Frasier. What was her name? Harriet Sansom Harris. That's a hell of a name. But Bibi from Frasier, I can't remember her exact name, but she was this like doctor who was fired and let go from the clinic. They were very happy with her at first, but it turned out she was doing some eugenics tampering with the embryos before things were finalized with the parents and all that. She was up to no good, and obviously I'm thinking Star Trek, I'm thinking Khan, I'm thinking those eugenics wars and all that shit as I'm hearing all this. That's what my nerd brain's going to. But this is, for me, where the episode started to get interesting, because it started to feel like it focused in on like an idea that was kind of, different. It was kind of unique. It was moving away from the other stuff. So, some of the first half, because whilst they're investigating the second murder, the girl from the first murder is abducted from the foster home that she's staying in that night. And this scene's fairly well directed, but it's kind of, I don't know if disingenuous is the right word I'd use, but because at this point in the episode we were still sort of thinking about UFOs and red lightning, that there's something really supernatural going on, it really comes across like they wanted to give the idea that whatever like got her was supernatural, because they never show a person. It's always very, the door's banging, but you never see anyone out the little window. It feels like a ghost or some sort of supernatural force is coming for her. And the only time you even get a sense of a figure is that the very split second she's grabbed, the lightning strikes, and you see kind of like a flash of a silhouette in the lightning. And I thought, oh, that ties to the red lightning maybe, and all those things. But once you actually get to what's going on, and it is just like a woman who's taken her, all of a sudden the way that was filmed feels a little bit like they were really tricking us with the style. But regardless, like once we get to this eugenic stuff, and once we get to this idea that this woman was doing experiments, that's quite interesting. I was getting more into it, and quite quickly Deep Throat shows up and talks to Mulder about this secret program. It was kind of like a race in the Cold War against the Soviets. They were also trying to do eugenics to create the perfect soldier. So the US naturally did the same, but it's all very hush-hush. No one's talking about it. Everyone will deny it ever existed. But he talks about how all the men that were created in this program were called Adam, and all the women were called Eve. And he gives them a location, a hospital to go to talk to one of the surviving Eves. And lo and behold, when Mulder and Scully get there, it's it's Fraser's assistant or his agent, right? It's Eve. Well, I think she's like Eve 5 or 6 technically, numbers wise, but so it's her. But she's all crazy. She's kind of psychotic. She's being very erratic in the scene. It's very clear that she talks about having like extra strength, extra mental like knowledge and intelligence, but Mulder also points out maybe increased psychosis as well, because you're a little bit off the deep end, and that seems to be what's happened here. So this experiment to create superior humans did create physically stronger and smarter people, but it also they kind of go mad by the time they reach a certain age, because the human body just isn't equipped to take it. Right, that's all very fascinating. I enjoyed Mulder and Scully walking through this place to get to her. Like, it's this like several tiered sort of like caged prison. They're going down this like sort of like staircase in the middle of the building, and it's kind of this one of these like sort of square staircases that are going down, and there's bars all over the place all the way. So there's this visual of them just walking like past all these bars as you hear the odd scream and the odd spooky noise that's going on in the building. All of that was really fun and just kind of entertaining. I also just a small bit of chemistry is when Mulder, before he goes to meet Deep Throat, he obviously's heard from him and knows that he's going to go meet him. So after he's talking to Scully a little bit about the case, he quickly says, "All right, Scully, it's time to go to your room." And she sort of like makes a little joke about, "You got a girl coming over? Because you're kind of kicking me out." And he's like, "Nah, there's a movie on TV that I want to watch," which no one's buying for a second. I'm pretty sure Scully's not buying that for a second. She knows Mulder well enough. But it's to go see Deep Throat, which leads to all this stuff. The big thing here, though, as well, is that there's a photograph of all the Eves when they were kids, and it turns out they're all identical to the two little girls in this episode. And it seems like the one who was impersonating... Well, I shouldn't say impersonating. That's not quite right, because she wasn't like... She was raised and became this doctor. This Eve that was doing the eugenics experiments at the fertility clinic. Like, she wasn't like... She didn't steal someone's identity. She just sort of grew up to become that. She did get her doctorate. She did do all those things. But she clearly was trying to perfect the process. She wanted to make more Eves, and that's what she did. She put clones into two different mothers who lived in different parts of the country. We now, at this point in the episode, assume that her and another Eve, so we suspect that there's two adult Eves running around, because the one in the asylum says that two escaped at different points in time. So we expect that they're working together, and that maybe they killed the dad simultaneously, and like now they've come to kidnap the girls. They kidnapped the first girl, and Mulder and Scully quite rightly suspect that they're going to come and kidnap the second girl. I actually had a question at this point. I was thinking, the first girl got kidnapped like the night of the murder, basically, because the murder happened early in the day, and it was that night she got kidnapped. And I was questioning, why did it take so long for the attempted kidnapping of the second girl? This isn't a plot hole. It actually makes sense once you get to it, because it's not actually two Eves working together. The one who kidnaps the first girl is also the same one who kidnaps the second girl, so it actually makes sense that, much like Mulder and Scully, they have to fly across country. And they kidnap the first girl after Mulder and Scully have already left for California, so it actually does make sense. But, everything up until that point in the episode was all like, no, these things were happening simultaneously. The murders were simultaneous. So I expected the girls were going to be kidnapped quite close together. And, so there was a natural thought process that made me think that, but it did make sense once it all kind of started falling into place. But sure enough, the second girl in her house is taken, and Mulder and Scully see a little bit of it, so they actually go looking for her and try to save her. And I think this is where I felt the disingenuous element of that first kidnapping, where it felt like a supernatural force was coming for her. Because when Mulder runs into her with the girl in this, she's literally just the actress with a hood on. She's got a hoodie up. And she's just holding a gun to the girl saying, I'm capable of doing this, let me go. And it just feels really normal and not in any way like a supernatural or paranormal force. So it made the first kidnapping feel a little bit like they were tricking us from a filmmaking point of view, because this one feels a lot more just like a person broke into a house and grabbed a kid. The first one did not feel like that. The first one felt like it was trying to convince us that, something really spooky was going on. That said, though, I was really enjoying the episode at this point. I think once it got to the fertility clinic, it was like, okay, I'm enjoying this line of thinking, I'm enjoying this progression. And then it has some nice little twists from here on out, because the big twist of the episode is that the girls did kill their dads, is that they've actually got like a psychic link, and they've known about each other for some time, despite the fact that they've never met. They just knew about each other's existence. And this Eve that's kidnapped both of them and assembles them at a hotel. Assembles is a weird word to use there. It's like they're putting the bodies together like Frankenstein. You know what I mean? Like she has them meet each other for the first time physically at the motel, and immediately they're smiling, and very quickly this adult Eve is like, why did you kill your dads? And they're like, they weren't our dads. They were never our dads. We're different. We're not like regular humans. And then it turns out they've poisoned her. They poisoned the adult Eve. They kill her too. It's like, oh shit, these two kids are like, we're getting some almost like creepy Shining twins stuff here. And for some reason at this point, they've both dressed in the identical red outfits, which, did the adult Eve intentionally buy these outfits for them? Did they go out of their way to get them some other time? It was just really weird that all of a sudden they had matching red outfits. But Mulder and Scully, along with the local police, like get wind of where they're staying, and they come and try and rescue the girls, because they still think they're innocent girls, of course. And they find the adult dead, and the kids say that this was meant to be a suicide pact, where they were all supposed to drink this thing that was going to kill them, but they didn't. They survived somehow. So, okay, right? They've got the kids, and I think this is where I was having a lot of fun with the episode, because from this point on, it was like, okay, Mulder and Scully are taking care of these kids, and they're driving them somewhere, and they're doing this long trip, and they stop at a diner along the highway. And it's just kind of a sort of like, okay, how are the girls going to try and get away? Or indeed, how are the girls going to try and murder Mulder and Scully? And frankly, they get shockingly close to killing Mulder and Scully. Like, that's it. No more X-Files. No more 8.5 seasons or whatever's left. Like, it was almost done because these two brats almost poisoned them. To the point where Mulder and Scully are sipping the drinks that the girls have put poison in. Because the one thing they tell us about this poison is that it's kind of sweet, so it's really easy to miss in like a drink, especially a soda. But Mulder and Scully get diet drinks because they're adults, I guess, and kids drink regular, adults drink diet. Sure, whatever. I'll buy that logic. And Mulder even points out that it's kind of sweet, But to be fair, I actually think the justification that he doesn't just immediately assume, especially once Sully also comments that it's kind of sweet, is that it comes from, you know, a draft. It comes from the soda machine, as opposed to, you know, it's not from a bottle, it's not from a can. So Sully, especially, she describes it as syrupy, which actually does sound plausible, because depending on your luck, when you go and get a drink, you know, a soda out of a machine where you're just, like, you know, firing it out the gun, sometimes it tastes quite flat, and sometimes it's extra sweet because they've just changed the syrup and it's fresh. So, like, that part of it's actually quite plausible. If anything, the least plausible part of this whole thing is the fact that when Mulder goes back in to get his keys that he's forgotten, and he sees the residue of the poison, like, on the table, that almost feels like the most far-fetched thing about this. But Mulder and Scully have taken some sips of this stuff, and there's a quick line about how, oh, we've not taken enough for it to actually be lethal. You know, you have to drink quite a bit of it, which is fine. You know, there's lots of things that are like that, where you have to take enough of a dose to get the effect that you're supposed to have from it. That makes sense. I did just kind of chuckle, because I was like, damn, like, they were really close to dying. These kids almost did in Mulder and Scully. And I guess that's because, and it makes sense, because they're unassuming. Like, you think they're innocent children. It was kind of interesting seeing them act like a family for a minute, where Mulder and Scully were taking them in to get drinks and taking them to the bathroom, and it was a nice build up of, like, waiting to see when the kids were going to strike, because it's like, are they just going to play along? You know, where are they just going to try and run away at one point? Ultimately, they trick the girls. When the girls run away after they're found out, they ultimately trick the girls by having Scully drive away in the car. And if you're paying attention, you can tell that there's no one in the passenger seat. But the girls think they've left the truck stop, and then Mulder jumps out. He's like, haha, I got you. In fact, he catches them a little bit earlier, actually, before this little plan. And a couple of truckers with shotguns, like, threaten Mulder and Scully, because it looks like they're trying to kidnap a pair of girls, which is fair enough, I suppose. But that just ties into the idea that the girls themselves are trying to manipulate things. You know, they say things like, we're just little girls, we didn't do anything, we're just kids. And Mulder's like, no, you're far from that. And it sounds like, yeah, like, one of the things that the adult Eve that they killed said before they killed her was that the other Eves from her generation, from her batch, they all became kind of crazy around 16 and became homicidal around 20. But these kids, these two new ones that were made, they seem to be developing much faster, and they seem to have more abilities. This like psychic connection, this link they've got, it seems to be an extra thing. And also just this idea that they're already scheming and murdering people at the age of, like, 8 or 9 or whatever they're supposed to be. So that sets them up. That's a fun, like, honestly, all this back half I enjoyed. Everything from them going to visit the Eve that was in the mental asylum, to even from the eugenics lab when they investigated that, through to, like, all the stuff with us, the audience, knowing the girls are dangerous, but the characters not being aware of that yet. And, you know, you don't think that a little girl is dangerous. You don't think that you have to fear for your life when it comes to a pair of kids. So it makes sense that there's some trust there, that you as the audience are screaming out and saying, no, they're trying to kill you, you know, Mulder, Scully, realize it quickly, please. But obviously there's some tension there, and I think all that was quite fun. And the girls are ultimately sent to the asylum with the other Eve. They're in the cells next door, and they're numbered as Eve 9 and 10. And the end of the episode is that the other adult Eve that we know is out there, because the Eve that kidnapped them, like, that's not the one who made them. That's not the one who was the doctor who was doing eugenics experiments at the fertility clinic. The one who kidnapped them even says in the scene that she came and kidnapped them because she, you know, found out they both killed their dads, and she does want to, like, end their life. She does want to put a stop to all this. In a weird way, despite the fact that she is obviously still a little unhinged, she seems to be trying to take them out of the equation because she knows they're all dangerous. Whereas at the end of the episode, the one who was at the fertility clinic, Eve number 8, I think her number was, she comes in, she somehow has credentials to come into this asylum, which maybe suggests that somewhere in the government she's still being funded, and they still it's not that she disappeared in the sense that she vanished into the night. It's that maybe she was recruited by a super top secret where the government want her to keep experimenting because it turns out she's good at it and she's getting results. So the end of the episode is her saying hello to the girls and then being like, we knew you were coming, we just knew. And she turns around and smiles because her creations have blossomed. If anything, she's fixed some of the problems they had. Although they're still murderous little shits though. But maybe if they're supposed to be good soldiers, that's the point. Like, I don't think we're ever going to get any of these characters again, but I would love if we get, like, these two Eves have grown up a little bit, so we get teenage versions of them, and they're being used as assassins by, like, the Black Ops part of the government. That would be a fun, like, future episode, I think. So, yeah, I had a good time with this episode, ultimately. My only critique, really, is that the first, like, 15 minutes or so, it feels like it's almost dangling a lot of like different directions in front of you, or not even different, just like one major different direction that is this huge red herring, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, except that it never feels like there's like a consequence of the red herring. Normally when you have a red herring, it's like the character at some point will realize, oh shit, I shouldn't have been looking at it this way because this is what's really going on. And they have to like deal with a consequence of thinking the opposite. Maybe there's another victim because you were thinking the wrong thing or something like that. But there's never really any kind of like payoff to the fact that we were hearing stories of red lightning or anything like that. I guess that's just something the kid was saying to make it sound weird and spooky because they're already scheming and murdering and stuff. That just felt a little bit disingenuous, mixed with that first kidnapping, which felt like it was really trying to pretend that there was something supernatural going on. But other than that, it's a pretty solid episode. The kids are creepy. I enjoyed them being evil little shits. I enjoyed Mulder and Scully having to figure out they were evil little shits and then outwit them. The mental hospital was good, and the lab and the eugenics stuff was all interesting topics. So yeah, that's a good episode. So let me know what you think of this one in the comments. Of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonuses over there. It helps keep all the content coming. It supports all the stuff on the channel. And please do hit the like button. It helps out a lot and helps more people find the videos. So if you're enjoying stuff, if you like watching along the show with me or just revisiting by hearing me talk about something you watched a long time ago, hit the like button. It helps out a lot. I should look ahead to next episode though. I usually do that. Episode 12 is called Fire, and here's a description on IMDb. Mulder and Scully join forces with an inspector from Scotland Yard when a man with pyrokinetic powers stalks members of the British aristocracy. That was one of those words where I had to just think for a split second how to pronounce it. There's too many syllables in aristocracy. Anyway, interesting. So Mulder and Scully are going to the UK, seemingly. Alright. I'm not surprised it's a pyrokinetic because, well, the name was Fire, so I was like, okay, someone's got flame powers. I make fun of Smallville for doing this, so obviously the X-Files predates it and is a much better show, but I it's just like, there's an episode called Fire, someone's got fire powers. There's an episode called Ice, someone has ice powers. The episode called Wind, someone has super farts. It's just... I have to roll my eyes at the basic title a little bit, but I can't say I'm not curious. I didn't expect, especially since season 1 had budget things. Now, I say that, I'm not actually expecting they shot scenes in the UK. I suspect they've got a few establishing shots, and they still mostly filmed wherever X-Files films. No doubt, they've just got a few British actors to, make it sound convincing, I assume. Unless it's... Nah, because it's Scotland Yard, so it has to be in the UK. Anyway, we'll see what next episode's like. We'll see how all that pans out. But I'm curious at the very least. Oh, Mark Sheppard's in the next episode. I know who that is. Cool. It's a young Mark Sheppard. I don't think I knew who he was until Firefly, and then obviously he was in things like Supernatural and stuff like after that. And Doom Patrol is probably the most recent thing I've seen him in, but that's cool. So, yeah, I'll see you next time for more X-Files. Thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?